Global tyranny and centralized global control from the highest level down to an individual level, as described literally in the Bible, is being implemented worldwide as we speak. Spearheaded by the United Nations and the World Health Organization, strategically enabled and sanctioned by the United States, and surgically advanced by the Biden administration, every person in the world, in every country, is soon to feel the heavy hand of global antichrist government. Envisioning and declaring themselves as saviors of mankind, the World Health Organization and global elites are consolidating total control over all humankind by usurping all matters of health decisions, down even to the local doctor-patient relationship. This is traitorous. It's a demonic venture, and its combined ambition through it all, supported by such groups as the World Economic Forum, the G20 nations, and with the full support, I'm going to say, of antichrist political, banking, and religious leaders from around the world. And with no opposition from any representative of the world's 194 nations, ideologues from nations around the world are literally conceding their sovereignty to the Marxist secretary of the World Health Organization. And it's this prophetical transition of sovereignty conducted in plain view, but under the cloak of demonic deception, that will be the focus of today's program and that of next week. The title for this two-part series is Global Tyranny and the World Health Organization, Threatening U.S. and World Sovereignty. Now, joining Isaac and me today is a very special guest and friend of all those who fear God and love freedom. That's the Honorable Michele Bachmann, former Congresswoman from the state of Minnesota, past candidate for President of the United States, and now Dean of the Robertson School of Government with Regent University in Virginia Beach, Virginia. However, before I bring in the Honorable Michele Bachmann, let me share just a bit of further history to set the backdrop for this critical time. While the United Nations became official in 1945, 78 years ago as of the taping of this program, the desire for a global supra-government goes back nearly 4,000 years to Nimrod in the Tower of Babel, who, after the Great Flood, rebelled against God's command then to repopulate the earth. God intervened and created various languages, making communication impossible except within people groups, and the world was divided as Genesis records. Now in our time, equally rebellious and lawless rulers have agreed among themselves to recreate, in essence, a new Tower of Babel housed in New York City, and with billions of dollars of American, Chinese, and God-rejecting billionaire money, the United Nations and elitist globalists are driving hard to consolidate human power and to fulfill the goals of most U.S. presidents since that time to implement what George W. Bush I declared in a speech before Congress. He said, a new world order. Well, while the broader goals of the United Nations include a unified world religion as well as unified political governance, the immediate strategic goal is to consolidate global control of all health decisions. Now, let me read a portion from a World Health Organization press release from December 1st, 2021, which forms the roadmap for last year's May meeting and the May 20 to 2023 meeting of the World Health Organization in Geneva, Switzerland, that was held not long ago. This is what they said. The World Health Organization agreed to kickstart a global process to draft and negotiate a convention agreement or other international instrument under the Constitution of the World Health Organization to strengthen pandemic prevention, preparedness, and response. Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, the WHO Director General, said the decision was historic in nature, vital in its mission, and represented a once-in-a-generation opportunity to strengthen the global health architecture to protect and promote the well-being of all people. Went on to say the COVID-19 pandemic has shined a light on the many flaws in the global system to protect people from pandemics. The most vulnerable people going without vaccines, health workers without needed equipment to perform their life-saving work, and me first approaches that stymie the global solidarity needed to deal with a global threat. That is the foundation for what is happening, and we lay that out as the foundation for this program. When we come back from this break, Isaac and I will bring in the Honorable Michele Bachmann as we engage and begin this most important discussion today.
Truth, flexible or permanent? The Bible, ancient history, or powerfully relevant? Culture, a reflection of enlightenment or warning signs? The pastor, commentator, or frontline combatant? Every day, American Pastors Network speaks to these questions where and when they matter. With hundreds of affiliate radio stations nationwide, a website and mobile app screening today's headlines through the twin lenses of the Bible and the Constitution, educating, informing, equipping. This is the American Pastors Network. The time is now to stand in the gap for truth.
Well, welcome back to Stand in the Gap, and welcome in right now, Congresswoman Michele Bachmann. Thank you for being with Isaac and I today.
Thank you, Sam. It's always great to be with you both.
Michele, you've been speaking on this subject, as I have. You and I have covered this subject on our Stand in the Gap Today radio program. Far too much, hard to get done in these two programs. We're going to take a stab at it. A lot of people watching right now may not even know necessarily who the World Health Organization is and the powers that they possess. So could you just briefly describe who are they and what empowers this group called the World Health Organization?
Well, the World Health Care Organization is quite simply the healthcare arm of the United Nations. The United Nations is a post-World War II organization that was established and has been present. And this is the arm that has been advisory only. That's what we know about the World Health Care Organization. They were created because there's a lot of different healthcare issues all over the globe, particularly 75 years ago when healthcare was far more primitive than it is today. And so this was an innocuous organization meant to help, not meant to hurt. Now this organization, since COVID, since the onset of the 3 years of COVID, this organization was seen as the authoritative organization. Even though it was an advisory, our United States President Joe Biden looked to the World Health Organization as the last word, the final word. And so the United States followed whatever the World Health Organization said. In fact, our corporations followed whatever the World Health Organization said, our social media, our cable news outlets. So whatever the World Health Organization said, that became a dictate. It didn't need to be that way. They don't have that type of power. But now the Biden administration wants to legally give the World Health Organization that level of power. And again, not as an advisory only capacity, but as a dictatorial enforcement and regulatory agency.
Okay, and that is part of the concern. Let me ask you one more question, and then Isaac will pose some questions to you, Michele. But that is this. You said advisory only, but yet we have seen through the whole COVID, as you said, literally somebody, them supposedly, had some kind of power behind the scenes, and the whole world fell into lockstep. That is part of the issue. Now, go ahead and answer that, but factor that into it. What is the mission of the World Health Organization?
Well, the mission is health, to gather data and to help nations make better decisions with healthcare. And in some cases, to supply supplies or medications or that sort of thing. But again, this organization never had power. It was only empowered by the President of the United States, Joe Biden, or any other national leaders who said that they would ignore their own scientists and their own doctors in their own country, and they would instead embrace and enforce whatever the World Health Organization said. That's was so remarkable about COVID. We never saw this before, where the World Health Organization was empowered, but it was empowered by political leaders in various countries.
And it's interesting, frightening, I guess you could say, to hear these words you're using, like, empowering a one world group of people, and the political, strategies that are going on, and just the control that they have. And I guess, we want to talk to you because God has given you just a unique opportunity, prepared you for many years working with folks in the United Nations and knowledge of this. But before we get into some of the things that you have seen firsthand in Switzerland with the World Health Organization and things, what is it that is so concerning for those of us who are God-fearing Americans, as well as just any freedom-loving citizen anywhere in the world? What should be the concern?
Well, I think the concern is we all lived under 3 years of emergency powers. Those emergency powers were just lifted May 11th by President Joe Biden in America. Now Joe Biden wants to give that level of decision-making, the power to call for an emergency, which could lock us down or mandate that we take a vaccine or wear masks or close down schools or churches. President Biden wants to give that level of decision-making authority to call an emergency to the World Health Organization. They've never had that power before, but he and other nations at the United Nations meeting for the World Health Assembly wanted to give that level of power to the World Health Organization. That would remove us from the United States as being truly a democracy where we get to elect the people who make the rules that we live under. Now sovereignty over decision-making, over the ability to call for an emergency, would leave the United States, and the decision-making authority would go to the UN, and we would be without remedy. We would not have the right of appeal for those emergency decisions. So presumably, if the World Health Organization said that we were going to be locked down for, say, 6 months, we would be in our homes for 6 months doing what they said, because the enforcement mechanism would be the United States government, because Joe Biden is giving this level of authority to the WHO. So therefore, he would be in a position to enforce what the WHO demands.
And again, it's hard to even wrap our minds around the kind of authority that you're talking about here that's being given to them. Could you talk to us now about the World Health Organization? Their most recent meeting was very recent, May of 2023, end of May 2023. What you know about it, what you saw of it, and just in general, in short, what the purpose of the meeting was and what the result of that meeting was.
Well, again, this is an innocuous meeting. It meets once a year. It is the governance organization over the World Health Organization. They set the rules for the World Health Organization. They have the international health rules that guides the organization. But President Biden led the effort with all 194 member states to change the rules over the WHO in a dramatic way that is an existential threat and an existential change, meaning the organization would be completely different than what it was before. It would actually create a platform for one world government, and that government would be administered through the World Health Organization. That's why this is so concerning. We've never seen this before. The United Nations has been around since the end of World War II, but there has never been a platform for world government where that government has been empowered. That's what's happening right now. And so the attempt during those 10 days, in the last 10 days of in Geneva, Switzerland, at this organization meeting, the purpose was to put the final plans in place so they could put the rules in place so that eventually they will have a vote on this effort, so they will be empowered to declare public emergencies of international concern, and that all 194 nations would follow whatever the dictate is that comes from the World Health Organization.
Michele, I know from talking with you and those watching us right now, if they're observant, they would know that they saw nothing in the media relative to what happened at that meeting where you were physically present. I'd like for you to share your experience there. Was there, for instance, any other congressman there? Any other U.S. senator? Did you see equivalent legislators from other nations of the world? Did you see any media there at that event?
There was a media room. However, I did not see the United States press. The media stayed in their media room. They weren't walking around the halls conducting interviews. And to your point, I saw no members of the United States House of Representatives. I saw no members of the United States Senate. The Health and Human Services Secretary, Xavier Becerras from the United States, was sent by the Biden administration to give assent, to give agreement to what was happening. It was a full-blown cheerleading squad that was sent from the United States government, from the administration, to be behind this effort. As a matter of fact, I had sent you a photo, I think, Sam, of the Director General of the World Health Organization standing next to our United States Health and Human Services Secretary. That's our highest official on healthcare in the United States. And in his tweet that he posted, the Director General of the WHO said, "I want to thank the United States of America. I want to thank Secretary Becerras for being supportive of this effort to change the international health rules with 307 new amendments. And I want to thank him for being behind the Global Pandemic Treaty." Now, they call it an accord at this meeting, but it is in effect a treaty. And what this would do is pass the power to call for a decision over health care away from the United States and away from all 194 member states, and then empower the Director General of the WHO to call for international health emergencies of public concern. So this is a huge effort. This may sound like bureaucratic language, but just like we lived under the dictatorial authority of a Dr. Anthony Fauci in America for 3 years, we would be living under dictatorial control forever into the future. We would not be able to decide on whether an emergency is called. Our government would no longer decide. That would be the United Nations. And they, again, would have the power to decide if we have to take vaccinations, if they are forced, if they are mandatory, if we have to lock down, if our children have to stay home from school, or our churches are closed, or businesses are closed, or put out of business. All the things that we dealt with for 3 years and worse, that level of power and authority would go to the United Nations. And remember, there were lawsuits that were filed, and some lawsuits were victorious. For instance, one being that the President of the United States didn't have the power to mandate that soldiers had to take vaccines. They were all told they had to, but some soldiers filed lawsuits, and those soldiers prevailed. That wouldn't happen anymore. We would have no right of appeal, either to the courts or to our members of Congress or to our state and local officials. This is a dramatic shift of authority and power away from the United States into an international body. And as you know, once power is given, once sovereignty is yielded, it doesn't come back very easily.
Well, and so, in short, you're describing something that, I think a lot of people fear this sort of thing happening, but they don't think it's really going on. Could you, as we just have a moment before we go to a break, but why don't we know more about this? Why are we, being caught off guard, I guess I should say, if, with all this is happening right now?
Well, by design, because I'm sure the Biden administration doesn't want to have pushback on this effort. But again, what I saw in Switzerland is a complete agreement. There was no nation that disagreed with this transfer of authority. Everyone was like bobblehead dolls, standing in agreement, all giving assent, no one disagreeing. It was carefully orchestrated. And the plan that they have is that in less than 1 year, next May, at the next meeting in Geneva, Switzerland, They plan to pass all 307 amendments. They plan to pass the Global Pandemic Treaty and then legalize this transfer of authority to the WHO. But in the meantime, 1 week after this meeting left, there was a press conference where the WHO and the European Union announced that the WHO would be the one administering global digital passports for all of Europe, 80 European countries. This actually is the global platform that will be used for enforcement. So the global governance comes through a global digital passport. And I was frankly shocked because they didn't talk about this at the conference in Geneva. But 1 week later, without any vote, it was just announced in a press conference that the WHO would administer what is effectively the platform for global governance, which is the global digital passport, which every human on earth will be mandated to have. It's essentially a QR code on your phone, and you have to be in compliance with the demands of the WHO, or you won't be able to travel, you won't be able to buy or sell, and all sorts of other issues that come along with that.
Well, we're going to take a brief time out, and we're going to come back to talk about these very concerning issues as we wrap up part one, and we have a part two next week, but part one of this looking at the global tyranny of the World Health Organization. We'll be right back.
Stand in the Gap is produced and recorded in the studios of Lighthouse TV. Positively different. Watch Lighthouse TV wherever you go. Available on Roku, Amazon Fire TV, and Apple TV. You can view our in-house studio productions on demand, or watch what's on the station right now with our 24/7 live stream. Search Lighthouse TV online on your streaming device, or go to our website lighthousetv.org for more information. Lighthouse TV, positively different.
Well, as we've been listening to the very concerning information coming out of what's really going on behind the World Health Organization, as you said, Congresswoman, that it really, it was set up seemingly for good reasons for many, many years, for generations, but now all of a sudden, since the pandemic, seems to have been emboldened and empowered. I guess the question for you is, you said there's 194 nations there at this last meeting in May. Over 300 amendments, over 300 things talked about, and they just kind of rubber stamped it, it sounds like. Nobody had any objections or any, in your opinion, as a former lawmaker, you have a lot of experience in the UN as well as throughout the United States. What do you think was behind that they're just all in seemingly lockstep agreement?
Well, I think part of it is, I think a lot of nations don't fully understand what they're giving up. I don't think it's been fully explained. Last year at the meeting, there were several small African nations who did object to this level of transfer of authority. But during that year, it's very possible that behind the scenes, a lot of nations, quite frankly, were paid off. And they were told that they would be given certain things if they would come up with agreement. This was not a deliberative body. There were no debates. It was as though the same communications director wrote the speech for everyone, and they gave the variation of the same speech of coming together. So now they're meeting, even this week, there's some details being worked out to synthesize the Global Pandemic Treaty with the 307 new amendments. They want every duck in a row. And so it's just a few people who call the shots. And for those who object, usually what happens is they get paid off or they get promised something, and that's usually how it works.
And Michele, thank you for this part. Again, ladies and gentlemen, we're at the close again, but this is part one. Next week, come back and join us again. Michele will be back here with us again, and we're going to go into more detail, more in regard to how this control may in fact be worked out, what they're actually talking about working out, a timeline perhaps, and we'll try to put these pieces together as we consider our theme here today, global tyranny and the World Health Organization. Well, thank you for watching us today, and for all of those of you who communicate to us, thank you so much. It's important that you do. Let us know from where you are watching this program. Let us know how God is blessing you and strengthening your life through the information on this program. And consider prayerfully to join with us financially, partner with us so that this program can be carried more broadly than it is right now. And pray for Isaac and I, and pray for all that goes into this program as we communicate truth of what's happening in this world from the perspective of a biblical worldview and what God's Word says. Because in the end, that's the only thing that matters, what God says.